People seem to ignore their intuition. What can people do better to tap into their intuition and be confident and listen and act on it?
Wow. The intuition is a powerful part of us that through education and social conditioning and familial conditioning has been subsumed, like hidden, like pushed to the back, like, oh, this doesn't work. Because we've been taught to be logical, systematic, left brain over here. This is the sequence, this is the order, this is how it works. If this happened, therefore that will happen. And so when we see that happening, when this has happened, and logic, it defies logic, then we, say, okay, that can't work. However, more and more now, especially with the awakening, the raising of consciousness that's happening, we're seeing where people are beginning to reconnect with their intuition. Here in Jamaica, where we're from, Jamaicans have an expression, my mind did tell me, spirit did tell me, me did know. That is their intuition. And so I would have to say in Jamaica in particular, everybody's intuition is strong, and thankfully many people still listen to their intuition. What I have found is in more developed countries where it's faster paced and you don't have time to listen to any intuition, you're just going with logic, boom, 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 this, that, and going with the logical, the left brain. So I have found, or I have observed that, more developed countries, more developed populations have put behind their intuition and are moving more with their left brain, logical mind. But intuition is real. It is like a little SOS, internal SOS that we are born with. We tend, most humans, we want to call it our, seventh sense, sixth sense, seventh sense. And so we all have it, and we all need to use it. It is like an SOS. Now, most people are not using it, but need to tap into its presence and acknowledge it. Because the more you acknowledge it, is the more developed it becomes. It's just like a muscle. The more you trust your intuition, is the stronger it becomes. The more you use your intuition, is the more you know when it's trying to get your attention. And you'll know, okay, when I have a tingle in my right toe, something is off. When I have, Jamaican people, them left eye jump or them right eye jump, they know what that means. So this is, not to mention the hand middle scratching you. That's your intuition. It's your body giving you signals, and it should be listened to. Now, what needs to happen is that people need to acknowledge that your intuition is linked with your right brain, your intuitive side, your creative side, the real authentic side of your brain. And so if even from a scientific perspective you understand that your intuition is linked with one particular hemisphere of your brain, then perhaps you will acknowledge it and respect it, because you know that it's not just some hairy-fairy thing. It's a real part of the human physiology to have an intuition. Now, once you acknowledge it and know it's there, then you start to follow it and be guided by it. I also consider following your intuition to be akin to following the path that is opened for you to follow. Because sometimes, rather than pushing against the closed door, you follow your intuition and just go that way that you didn't plan, that makes no logical sense, but that is where the success lies. That is where you're going to go meet the person who is going to connect your dots to make the things that need to happen. So I have stopped discrediting my intuition a long time ago. There is this thing called procrastination, and people have been giving procrastination a bad rap, right? I used to feel so bad when I was procrastinating, Turns out it wasn't procrastination. It was my intuition saying, listen, stop. Wait until some conditions are more favorable, then you go again. So sometimes society and those people who are gearing you and coaching you to be successful, they'll say, oh, procrastination is bad. I have year after year after year in my personal life observed how procrastination actually is linked to my intuition, telling me to just stop, hold on, rest, relax, and just wait until the conditions are right. So I would challenge everybody listening to this to now take a look again at procrastination and see if some of the procrastination that you have participated in has resulted in your ruin or in the optimization of a certain set of circumstances. So, just watch your intuition, follow it. Many, many, many people have documented how their intuition has saved them from accidents, saved them from going to an event where there was a disaster, saved them from going on a trip that turned out to be not so favorable. Don't question it anymore, more and more. I call it like a superpower. And with now all of the ramping up of our consciousness, our intuitions are going to be coming in stronger. It's because we're going to need them for the conditions that are unfolding currently, that we're going to be part of. We're going to need our intuition more than ever. So listen to your intuition. Watch your dreams. Watch your emotions when you wake up in the morning and coming out of a dream. You don't remember the dream, but the dream left you with an emotion. And that emotion is going to now guide your intuitive process and how you are going to feel to do or not to do something. Accountability when it comes to your health and your wellness is something that I see lacking, especially with respect to lifestyle diseases. We all know what causes hypertension. We all know what causes diabetes. We all know what causes weight gain. We all know what causes, other things like acne. We know the root causes. Yet, because we're not taking accountability for our health, then it starts to slide, and then we now rely again on an external input, like medication, to quell the imbalance that has been brought on by a lack of accountability with respect to our bodies, right? Time and time again, I meet people who say, oh, they're on this medication. Why are you on this medication? Because I have this. I'm like, well, there are a lot of things that you can eat or stop eating that will allow you to get better. But people just don't want to take accountability. They don't want to take responsibility. They continue to eat the way they've always eaten. They continue to indulge in activities that they know are going to have a specific outcome. Again, that is another aspect of taking accountability for your situation. Persons that are, they say they're addicted to some substances, and I know I'm going to get bashed for this, but the coffee drinkers out there, coffee drinkers, oh my goodness, you cannot tell a coffee drinker that they should not drink coffee. They're going to tell you, well, they have to. Well, guess what? We were born without coffee. And many people in this world do not have access to coffee. And they have to get up and they have to function. Right? So it's really about accountability. Yeah? Same thing with food. We know that eating too much processed food is going to affect us. We know that eating too much sweets is going to affect us. We know that eating too much starches are going to affect us. But we still eat it I'm guilty, I know. But this is what we are called upon to do right now, in this time, when the consciousness is raising. Our body needs to keep, um, you know, in the same realm as our consciousness. And so we need bodies that are healthy, that are strong, that are balanced, that are being nourished properly. So, you know, it's one of those things that I always tell people, that they have to take accountability for their health and not leave it in the hands of the doctors or the pharmaceutical industries. Things like accidents and trauma, where you know you need to be dealt with at the hospital, then you leave yourself in the hands of the doctor to take care of you. But things that you can control, take accountability for, so that you're able to navigate. Now, accountability, in terms of a definition of accountability, willingness to take responsibility for your actions or for certain aspects of what you do daily. I think one of the reasons why we are not as accountable as we should be is because our education system, our religious systems, and our professional systems have trained us to direct our authority outwards. So we look to our elders or our teachers as the authority, and we look to our employers as our authority, we look to our leadership as our authority, and we basically give away our authority and at the same time give away our responsibility or willingness to take responsibility for ourselves. In religion, we don't take accountability. We say, well, you know, it's the devil that made me do it, or Satan did this, or whatever. When it was a series of actions that you took that has resulted in the outcome that is now unfolding, or it is simply an accident, right? So accountability really is something that we all should go out of our way to start taking for ourselves. And you know, when I think about accountability with respect to externalizing authority, I think about sovereignty. And sovereignty is having to do, again, with your personal authority. So when we take responsibility for our actions and for the outcomes of our actions, then we are going to take even greater care about the actions, every single one of our actions. To speak or not to speak, to stand back or to stand up for, to stand against or to stand for, to support or to not support a situation. All of those things are actions. And when we take accountability for ourselves, we bear all of them in mind. Just recently, we just finished Easter in Jamaica. And I have always taken accountability for my health and for my nutrition. But I succumbed to eating bun and cheese in larger quantities than I should have. But I take accountability for it. And I am making up for it by doing the necessary fast and being extra steadfast in terms of my nutrition for the next couple of days, weeks, months. This is what I'm talking about. You take an action, you realize that you didn't take the accountability or, you know, that you needed to, you can still make up for it. In terms of interpersonal relationships, you can take accountability if you have done the wrong thing, said the wrong thing, and you can man up or woman up by taking the high road. If you need to apologize, you apologize. If you need to admit that you were wrong, admit that you were wrong. There's this whole thing right now where, you know, people are saying, you know, they're some people are gaslighting or they were gaslighted. Take accountability. Just be the bigger person. Admit you're wrong when you're wrong. Apologize to people, apologize to groups. You know, in leadership, you make errors of judgment. Don't just pretend you didn't make an error. Be respectful to the people that you interact with and admit that you've made an error. And people will respect you more because they know that you're being objective, you're taking accountability for your behavior, you're taking accountability for the positions that you've held that turn out to be not quite the position that they need to be. Step back and say, hey, I was wrong. Now that I know what I know, I can admit that I was wrong. You know, I don't have to be defensive, because part of being accountable means just being objective, being reasonable, being fair, stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, I apologize, admitting that I was wrong, thanking people for showing you that, hey, this was the error, here is a solution, acknowledging the people around you that were able to point out the area in which you erred. Yeah? When everybody takes accountability and responsibility for the behaviors, for the actions, for their less than ideal opinions and, you know, pushing those opinions, then we have a situation where people are less defensive, people are more harmonious with each other, people trust each other. Because when people know that you're going to be, you know, like a dictator, or you're going to hold your position, or you're going to be stubborn about how you feel, then everybody gets tense. Then you have a situation that is volatile or toxic, and there's no need for that. When everybody takes accountability, then you just have a more harmonious situation overall for everyone. So trauma is a huge part of life and living. Many persons on this planet right now have had, you know, childhood trauma, and trauma leads to, you know, illness later on in life, an inability to interact harmoniously with other people, and sometimes it has psychological impacts. However, a big part of healing from trauma is recognizing the trauma, acknowledging your role in it, forgiving the other party that may have caused the trauma or been responsible for the trauma. That is like the hugest part. And that is, I think, the most difficult part. So I would not recommend for someone to stay in the environment where the trauma was caused or where the trauma took place and try to heal. Not unless you are like a super aware person and a super skilled and educated in these areas, right? If you are, then you can attempt it. But I've seen very many, you know, professionals who understand trauma and trauma responses and how to deal with trauma release, and they struggle with issues that they went through, by the way, that pushed them into this kind of work that they are doing, because they understand it so well. You know what they say, when the healer heals himself, then he can heal others. So many persons that are dealing with assisting people with trauma are themselves victims of severe trauma, right? Now, what I recommend is that you take yourself out of the situation if it is possible, and then do the work of releasing the trauma, analyzing it. But I see in the methodologies right now where there's probably a little bit too much emphasis on rehashing the trauma and putting a name on the trauma and giving it a title and then spending so much time on the trauma rather than releasing the trauma. So I definitely recommend that people you find someone who can assist with trauma release, not trauma rehashing, trauma release, so that you can heal from it. Definitely it is easier to achieve healing when you're out of the environment. It takes a really big person to take the high road and heal themselves from trauma while they are with and around the source of the trauma. A really big person. The average person cannot. So I definitely don't recommend. And for most of the traumas that I have observed, forgiveness is the root thing that will assist in releasing the trauma. And I can speak firsthand when I say that you probably are going to need help with forgiveness. You need someone who is skilled and trained in talking you through the logic of forgiveness. And perhaps some people where the trauma is really deep-seated may need someone who has training in energy healing to help you to physically release the trauma. Trauma is stored in your body. Depending on what the trauma is, it's stored in different parts of your body, it's stored in different parts of the brain, and so it affects your physiology. So a lot of the trauma, the depression and the anxiety that we are seeing in people has to do with emotional trauma. Some of them physical trauma, some sexual trauma, violence-related trauma. And so it requires real deep-seated work to help people to release that from their body. Some of the diseases, because remember, trauma is going to stimulate a physiological reaction, production of, certain hormones, chemicals, secretions in the body. And if it's produced on a sustained basis, then it's going to cause a buildup, and then you're going to have imbalances or dis-ease. So this is why it's important to find out the root causes of your traumas, which can possibly correlate to some of the root causes of the disease or the illness that you have. I encourage everyone to do the research. There is a lot of information out there. Carolyn Miss has a book, You Can Heal Your Life. When you know the trauma, when you can identify the trauma that is related to your imbalance or your illness or your disease, then you can go about fixing it, healing it, releasing it. Guilt has to do with an action that you've taken that you feel badly about because you feel that it was the wrong action, it was a negative action, and you've been, sometimes programmed to believe that you should not do this thing. And so you do it inadvertently or because you had to, and you feel guilt. So guilt is an internal experience that has to do with an external action you took. Guilt is sometimes related to shame, because shame is now an external imposition on you because of something that you've done or are. And so guilt and shame are really having to do with external, internal relationships. people make you feel guilty and you make yourself feel guilty. So it's a very complex thing. Shame also is very complex. And guilt and shame are at the root of a whole nother set of imbalances that people are having more often. A lot of the depression and anxiety is focused around guilt and shame. Guilt sometimes and shame sometimes have to do with just not feeling that you're good enough. A lot of self-love issues are related to the guilt and shame. And so I can see right now trending globally where people are actually acknowledging these issues of guilt and shame and are trying to get themselves to love themselves, accept themselves as they are, acknowledge their authenticity and not be, bothered by the external opinions of others where that's concerned. I have also found that parents can sometimes impose their will on children. And so when their will is not done, then children will grow up and become adults and still feel guilty or feel shame because they did not achieve the wants or the desires of their parents. Likewise, leaders, likewise, teachers in school. So those relationships with superiors or persons in authority have led us, have resulted in a lot of the guilt and shame that we now experience. The church and religion is also a part of the guilt and shame experienced by a lot of people. We just have to call it for what it is. Norms are changing. There are expectations, of 30 years ago, of 40 years ago, that are just simply unrealistic in modern society. But still, we carry the guilt and shame because we still hear that little voice in our head. We remember what our grandmother used to tell us about this aspect or that aspect of things, and so we feel a lot of shame. It's time to let go of guilt. It's time to let go of shame. Accept yourself, love yourself. Start to pick apart the things that you are guilty about and see if they are man-made. Are they societally imposed expectations? If they are, and they're not serving you, you can let them go and not feel guilty about it. I mean, personally, I'm still reassessing a number of things, and the things that I don't find relevant anymore because I've stepped away from expectations, from society, from friends, from those in authority, and I just reassess it. And if it's no longer serving me and I can't see the logic, I let it go, and I'm no longer having the guilt. When I was growing up, they told me that my nose was flat. I was ashamed of my nose being flat. But now that I realize that this is just how I was designed and built by the Creator, I accept it. Yeah? Again, the preponderance of women getting this part of their body done and this procedure to enhance their features, it's also a part of the guilt and shame that they're feeling from what society has said is beauty, what society has said will give them greater visibility in this world, acceptance in this world, in their field, and so on. My advice, reassess everything and start over from scratch. The beautiful thing is that we can, flip the script and start over, a blank page, and build from there. That's the beauty of now. We have access to that. release all the guilt, release all the shame, and see how your physiology changes. See how your relationships, your interpersonal relationships also shift in the positive. With respect to parents and imposing their will on their children, I think there are two things happening actually in modern days, where parents who suffered from their parents imposing their will on them have now given their children carte blanche to run amok and do anything they want. And so they're not really governing and setting boundaries. So I think we have to be careful to ensure that we are still maintaining some level of boundaries for our children, because children need boundaries to really function well. And then we have to just be careful of what we're imposing on our children. Yes, we want them to do well in school. We want them to finish their education so that they will be able to go out into the world and be the best that they can be. But if you have a child that is simply not academic, you cannot force a square peg into a round hole. Rather than force or impose your will and the will of the school system on that child, look at what the child is good in and then navigate them, help them to get better at what they're good at. So you're not imposing your will on the child. You're helping them to isolate their strengths, and then you nurture their gifts and strengths. So I think it's important when we're discussing the guilt and shame thing to ensure that parents are just a little bit more aware of how they, treat their children, how they push their children, so that children are not scarred and left with guilt and shame for not achieving what their parents expected of them, what their teachers expected of them, what their peers expected of them. Very important. So there's been a lot of discussions lately as to the matrix and being a part of the matrix and creating your reality, or just going along with the flow of what you're seeing unfolding. There's a lot of fear-mongering. There's a lot of, panic as to what is going to unfold. And there are always two sides to look at it. There are plans being unfolded as we speak by different groups of people that have special interests. And we have, for many, I would say decades and even centuries, just gone along with the plan that is unfolding for us. I believe there's a shift right now, and there's an opportunity for us to play a greater role in co-creating our reality. So it really has a lot to do with us recognizing our sovereignty and recognizing how powerful we are, and recognizing how holding a particular vision for yourself and your situation, the situation around you in your locality and in the world, just holding that vision can play such a significant role in manifesting that reality. And I feel as if now, at this time, people all over the world need to recognize that they play a significant role in the reality that is being created right now. Gone are the days where we are the victims and we have to wait and we are being subjected. At any given moment in time, we can take a decision that, hey, that's going on, but that's not going to happen to me. And I've seen this starting to play out even in my life. I see what's going on around me. And I sometimes get anxious and say, but this is crazy. This is what's going to happen. there's going to be famines, and there's going to be disaster, and there's going to be war, and there's going to be crime, and there's not going to be enough. But as I see that happening in some areas, I see a different reality around me. I see a reality where there is abundance. I see a reality around me where there is harmony. I see good, beautiful friends. I see everything, beauty, prosperity, joy, happiness around me. And so for all the people that are worried, you can literally carry that reality around you in a bubble, so that wherever you go, there is tranquility, there is peace, there is harmony, there is plenty, there is abundance, there is joy, there is love, there's friendship. Yeah? I said that to someone recently, and they said, wow, I've seen myself, you know, in the middle of like a holiday weekend when there's a lot of traffic and a lot of mishaps on the road, and everywhere is crowded, and there's massive crowds and pushing and so on. And I've seen my intuition guide me to locations where there is tranquility, there's peace, there's beauty, there's good friends, and comfort in the midst of all the turmoil and the chaos going on. Some people, for example, during the pandemic, had a very rough time. There was illness around them, there was a lot of death around them. Meanwhile, some other people that were carrying a particular vision for themselves, consciousness for themselves, and no fear, they had a different situation. They saw no death, they saw no illness around them. They just saw peace, quiet, and a nice long break, an extended vacation. So we get to choose in this time whether we take the dark path, you know, I'm going to spell it out, transhumanism, the New World Order, or we take the heavenly path, which is going to be the new earth, which is going to be peace, simplicity, joy, health, healthy foods, harmony, beauty, because we're going into the natural areas. There is a separation of the world taking place right now, but you get to choose right now based on certain actions you're taking, certain actions you refuse to take, certain actions that you feel are necessary to take you into the path that you'd think you need to be in. So there is no longer a need to feel like you're a victim. You can establish your sovereignty, your personal sovereignty, and decide how you want to show up in this world and move in this world. And that's what's going to guide you into the world that you will enjoy in the next couple of weeks, months, years.